Qasim, Sulaiman, it's a pleasure to speak to you both. This is the first time you ever speak publicly about really anything related to your father or anything at all. For anyone that doesn't know, especially those outside of Pakistan, your father, former Prime Minister Imran Khan, was jailed over a year ago now. It was, I think I told you guys, I did an interview with him weeks beforehand on the day of the Russian mutiny. And it's one of the most emotional interviews I've ever done. And, you know, most Pakistanis, most of the international community view this imprisonment as just a complete political witch hunt. And it seems as part of a broader, history of military control by the Pakistani military, or political control by the Pakistani military. That's essentially dominated the country's politics for decades now. I want to start with a quote, a tweet by your mother, Jemima. In the last few weeks, there have been serious and concerning developments regarding my son's father, Imran Khan's treatment in prison. The Pakistani authorities have stopped all visits to him by his family and his lawyers. They have also postponed all court hearings. In addition to cutting off in-person visits, and in defiance of a court order, his weekly calls to his sons, Sulaiman and Qasim Khan, you guys, who are British and who live in London, were stopped on the 10th of September. We've received reports that the authorities have now turned off the lights and electricity in Imran Khan's cell, and he's no longer allowed to leave his cell at any time. The jail cook has even been sent on leave. He's now completely isolated, in solitary confinement, literally in the dark, with no contact with the outside world. His lawyers are concerned about his safety and well-being. So that was your mum a few months ago, October last year. Guys, again, pleasure to have you on the show. And my first question is this an accurate description by your mother?
Yeah, I mean, completely. We've known for a while that he's gone through periods of having no light in his cell. He's been in there for nearly 2 years, and there have been periods of, no access to the outside world, no access to doctors. We're well aware of the situation, and he's been in, prolonged solitary confinement. So, if only we were able to speak to him more. The court mandates that we speak to him once every week. We speak to him once every 2 or 3 months, if that.
I think when that tweet was put out, was actually after large protests in Pakistan about the elections and about just general suppression of democracy in Pakistan. And as a punishment, I think they really ramped up those punishments, no light in the cell, no visitors, and so on.
So I heard that I think he mentioned it himself, and a few others have talked about it, that he's in a death cell, which is essentially not only solitary confinement, but solitary confinement that's mainly aimed at either those with a death sentence or even terrorists. He put out a message himself, I think it was mid last year. He said, quote, "I am confined in a 7 by 8 foot death cell, typically reserved for terrorists to ensure they have no contact with anyone." Can you tell me more about that cell and his conditions, and maybe also give us an idea of the last time you've spoken to your father?
What we know is that he has no access to other prisoners. He is, alone in there. He's occasionally in the pitch black for prolonged periods. There was one period where he was in there for 10 days in the pitch black, no electricity, no nothing. And I remember when I spoke to him about that, he said the first 2 days were beyond difficult, and then he was able to get into a kind of Zen-like mentality, and what ended up being 10 days, he said it could have been a year. So yeah, the situation in his cell is pretty bleak.
He is, one thing I know about your father, he is a very resilient man. You kind of touched on how he's coping with this. Can you give us an idea of how was it in the early stages when you have those calls with him, and how is it today? Is he still as strong? Is he struggling? I can't even imagine being in the dark for 10 days.
So he's definitely, that's a very accurate description. He's definitely, resilient. He's probably one of I would say I'm obviously biased, but he is definitely the most resilient person that I know by a distance. Very, very mentally tough. And he sat whenever we speak to him, he's as strong as ever. But you know, he's not the type of person to complain about the conditions that he's in. Whenever we will always ask how he is, but he'll always sort of brush off those sorts of questions. He's more interested in hearing how we are.
I know he's dealt with it in a way that, you know, is what I think is the right way of dealing with it, is he just reads loads and loads of different parts of historical literature, religious literature, and then he does exercise. And it's his two things that he's always loved in life. So I think in a cell, it suits him in a way to just be able to focus on those two things. And every time we call, you know, we only get to speak to him for about 20 minutes. And around that time, randomly, the line will cut off. So he's so focused on ensuring that
वीडियो में आगे बढ़ने से पहले मैं आपको बताना चाहूंगा एक ऑनलाइन ट्रेडिंग प्लेटफॉर्म के बारे में जिसका नाम है गुरु ट्रेड 7। इस एप्लीकेशन पर 1 मिलियन से भी ज्यादा लोग भरोसा करते हैं एंड यहां से पैसा कमाते हैं। अगर आप बिगिनर्स हो, आपको कुछ नहीं पता, तो आपको साइन अप करने पर मिलेंगे 10,000 रुपीज बोनस, जिससे आप ट्रेडिंग करना सीख सकते हो सीरियसली। और आपको यहाँ पे ज्यादा इन्वेस्ट करने की जरूरत नहीं है, आप 100 रुपीज में यहाँ पे ट्रेडिंग चालू कर सकते हो। आप यहाँ पर एक ट्रेड 20 रुपीज से कर सकते हो सीरियसली। और यहाँ पर आपको काफी सारे पॉपुलर एसेट्स मिल जाते हैं जिसमें आप ट्रेडिंग करके अच्छा खासा पैसा कमा सकते हो। आपको ट्रेडिंग करने के लिए पुट और कॉल सिलेक्ट करना होता है। आपको जितना भी पैसा इन्वेस्ट करना है, मैं 50 रुपीज पुट पर लगा दिया हूं एंड यहाँ पे अगर ग्राफ नीचे चला गया तो तुम्हारे भाई को प्रॉफिट हो जाएगा। तो आप यहाँ पर देख सकते हो 80 रुपीज का प्रॉफिट हो चुका है। और यहाँ पर डिपॉजिट करना कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है, आपको यहाँ पे काफी सारे पेमेंट।
he's able to spend the first 10 minutes imparting wisdom of whatever he's learnt, whatever religious or life lessons he can impart on us, and then the last 10 minutes he's very focused on finding out how we are, what's our situation, how's our family, and things like that. So we don't actually get very much time to ask about how he's coping, but I know he's doing a lot of reading, that's for sure.
So your last call, did you say how long ago was your last call?
2 weeks ago, probably. Yeah, probably the first call we've had with him for about 2 months. But yeah, we were lucky enough to speak to him like 2 weeks ago.
How does that work? So like, do you know in advance you're going to speak? Like, so for example, today, do you know when you're going to speak to him next?
No, so it's really chaotic. In fact, I'm glad you asked, because we'll get a message and it can be sometimes at about 4 a.m. On any day, and it'll suddenly say, okay, call coming at 10 a.m. So we have 6 hours, and if we're not awake through that period, then we miss it, which has happened before, and then we have to wait another 3 months before anything comes about. But usually we're able to, we're quite on it with it and are able to rush whatever situation we're in. We cancel, for me, I cancel any meetings, whatever it is. And instantly we jump on, and then often we're left waiting for about an hour, and then eventually the call comes through, and then we have about 20 minutes to speak. So there's no protocol. It's a complete mess.
It just feels like a torture technique. Why do you think they're doing it this way? Why are they treating the former prime minister of the country, and what I consider to be the most popular man in the country? Like, I get people all the time when I meet someone from Pakistan, a lot of times they remember me from that one interview. That interview had more impact on people talking to me than any leader I've ever interviewed. Just to kind of give an idea to the world of how popular Imran Khan is in Pakistan. And again, he was the former prime minister, a very popular one. Why do you think they're treating him this way?
You hit the nail on the head. It's a technique to try and break him. He's a very, very resilient person, and I don't, he's one of the hardest people possible to break. But all of these techniques, shutting off the lights, leaving him in the pitch black, not allowing doctors to go and see him, making sure that all of our calls are at completely random times and that we might miss them, or whatever, not letting us have our court mandated weekly phone calls. All of this is tactics to try and break him. But he's, good luck, because he's as resilient as they come mentally, and that comes down to his faith. He has strong faith in God. And also he's, always had that kind of mental toughness as well. So it's all torture techniques, exactly as you say.
Another thing, wasn't he offered, because he did an essay not long ago on Time magazine, and he talked about being offered the option or a deal that included house arrest, and he rejected that deal. And I think he had demands. I think he wanted some other people related to his family or members of his political party. Maybe Sulaiman, can you give me a bit more context on that deal? And kind of him rejecting that deal is another indicator of his resilience.
So I think that's mainly to do with the fact that there are many of his supporters and his party members and family members who are in prison currently in similar conditions to him. So and he's very, very principled, and he wouldn't, on their behalf, I think that definitely would have played a part. He wouldn't want to kind of he'd want to be aligned with them.
He's always been kind of very principled, and I don't think he'd go against his principles very on a whim.
What have you guys told him? Like, I'm just imagining if I had my father or a family member in a similar position, and I'd be urging him, because you guys born in London, live in London, so you're away from Pakistani politics.
वाले हैं, आप 10,000 की कैपिटल को 1 लाख
कैसे बनाएं?
साल में 15 बार या 2 साल में 15 बार या 3 साल में 15 बार कैसे बनाएं? कॉन्फिडेंस कैसे बढ़ाएं? हम इसके ऊपर बात।
ये साल में 15 बार कहने का मतलब पूरे साल में 15 ट्रेड?
10,000 की कैपिटल, मैं आपके अंदर कॉन्फिडेंस तब मानूंगा जब 10,000 की कैपिटल को आप 1 लाख रुपए बना कर दिखाएं।
ठीक है।
या फिर 10,000 की कैपिटल को पैसा लूज करने में आपने कम से कम 30 डेज लगाए।
अच्छा, ये भी क्या चेक, मतलब 10,000 आपके पास हैं तो 30 दिन से पहले उसको खत्म ना कर देना।
हाँ,
इतना पेशेंस हो कि 30 दिन लग जाए उसको खत्म करने।
हाँ, और तरीके से, ऐसे नहीं आपने सारा लगा दे।
कहाँ जाना है?
चाचा वहां ले चलो जहां 2 मिनट में लोन मिल जाए।
ओके, ये लो बेटा, सिर्फ राम फिनकॉर्प ही है जो देता है 2 मिनट में लोन।
And if I was in your position, I would be convincing my father to do whatever it takes just to get out of jail and just to have his freedom again. Have you guys tried to convince him of doing this?
So actually, when we were younger, when I was younger, I'd hated him being in politics. Would way rather him just do sort of cricket punditry or analysis, and live an easy life in London or out of politics. But it is genuinely his passion, and I don't think he'd feel fulfilled if he wasn't doing what he's doing. I don't think he'd be happy if he was just living a kind of easy life in London, because I think if he wanted to be in exile, he could, but he's genuinely.
He could easily make a deal. Like he would, if from a political perspective, I'm sure they have certain demands. The easiest one is, and this is me speaking, obviously my own opinion, but him speaking in support of the military, for example, or of the opposing political party. Just one example of many of things he could do to gain back his full freedom. But I think his defiance is the reason he's in jail. And do you still, I know you said in Qasim the same question to you after Sulaiman, but do you still try to convince him to get out of politics, or you've kind of given up on that?
No, I mean, I personally would never, I wouldn't even want to say that to him, because imagine you're his son and all he speaks to. So when we spend time with him, a lot of the time we'll be kind of whatever, when we were younger, we were playing cricket with him. Now, watching films, whatever it is, half of the time he's spent lecturing us on rule of law, justice in Pakistan, how, the reasons why he got into politics, we know them so well. And it would be just to go against everything he preaches about, to suddenly just say, okay, I'm going to give up and I'm going to live an easy life. It's just, it's not in his nature. He has a single-minded obsession to try and help the people of Pakistan, and it's in such turmoil right now, Pakistan. He's dedicated to it, and he's not going to give up.
And he's always wanted you guys to be out of politics. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think, well, if you look at the two established parties in Pakistan, there's a tradition of it's like dynastic politics. They're dominated by two different families, and so he's always wanted to. He hasn't wanted his party to follow that tradition, and yeah. So I personally don't ever want to be involved in politics in Pakistan, and I don't think he wants us to be either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, Kasim, you're in a similar position. You don't want to be involved in you're a very successful entrepreneur as well, so you've got a life outside of politics, and kind of this implies, the answer to my next question is that why do this interview and why now?
So more than anything, we've gone through the legal routes. We've gone through,